My wife's affair turned out to be my daughter's best friend. I wish I could tell you I saw it coming, that I had some sixth sense that warned me my life was about to go off the rails. But the truth is, I didn't. I was the guy smiling in family photos, grilling burgers in the backyard, completely clueless that the storm was already brewing right over my head. Let me take you back to how it all looked before everything fell apart. My name is Sam. I'm 45, work in IT, the kind of guy who can debug a server but somehow can't figure out when his own marriage is breaking down. I'm tall, starting to go a bit soft around the middle, and I live in jeans and old band t-shirts, because why bother pretending to be cooler than I am? People say I have a dry sense of humor. I think that's a polite way of saying I laugh at my own dumb jokes. Then there's Georgia, my wife. She's 43, but you'd never guess it. She's one of those women who always looks like she stepped out of a catalog. Neat dresses, perfect hair, makeup just right, even when she's just running errands. She works in marketing, and people love her. Friends, co-workers, neighbors. Georgia's the kind of person who lights up a room. I used to love that about her. Maybe I still do, in some strange way. And Emily, our daughter. She's 21, a junior at a university nearby. Big green eyes like her mom's, always smiling, always kind. Emily has this way of seeing the good in everyone. I've always been proud of that. She's smart too, way smarter than I was at her age. She's studying environmental science, wants to make a difference, and to me, she always has. We live in a cozy house in the suburbs of Chicago, nothing fancy, but it has a big yard and a wooden porch where I like to sit with a beer after work, the kind of place that looks like stability from the outside. You know, the American dream, and for a long time I thought we were living it. Our days were filled with what I told myself was contentment. Georgia would make dinner, or we'd order in on busy nights. Emily would come home from school with stories about classes, friends, and her latest big idea to save the planet. Weekends were for grocery runs, yard work, maybe a trip to the lake if we felt ambitious. Sure, things weren't perfect. Georgia and I hadn't had that spark in years. Our conversations were more about schedules and bills than dreams and desires. I worked long hours. She worked long hours. We were tired. But isn't that just what happens after 20 years of marriage? You trade passion for partnership, fireworks for familiarity. That's what I thought anyway. I remember the first time I heard about Dan. Emily came home from class one afternoon practically glowing. She dropped her backpack by the door, kicked off her sneakers, and started rambling about some group project she was working on. Dan is so great, Dad, she said. He's brilliant, but like not in a stuck-up way. He helped me with our stats assignment, and he's hilarious. I swear, he could be a stand-up comic. I chuckled, happy that my daughter had found such a good friend. Maybe even more than that, though I wasn't the kind of dad to immediately suspect every guy she mentioned. I trusted Emily. I trusted her judgment. A few days later, I finally met Dan. It was a Saturday, one of those perfect early autumn afternoons when the air is crisp but the sun's still warm. Georgia suggested we have a cookout, and Emily asked if she could invite Dan. Of course, I said. I was eager to meet this guy, who had my daughter grinning ear to ear every time she mentioned his name. Dan showed up with a six-pack and that easy confidence that some young men have, the kind that makes you like them, even as you wonder if they're a little too smooth for their own good. He was tall, fit, probably spent more time at the gym than I ever had. His hair was messy in that on-purpose way, and he had this grin that made you want to laugh along with him, even if you didn't get the joke. Mr. Anderson, it's great to meet you. Emily talks about you all the time, he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. We spent the afternoon flipping burgers, drinking beer, and swapping stories. Dan was charming, no doubt about it. He made Georgia laugh, made Emily beam with pride. I remember thinking how lucky Emily was to have a friend like him, someone who looked out for her, made her feel good about herself, someone I could trust. Looking back now, I want to shake that version of myself. The guy standing at the grill, grinning at his daughter's best friend like he just won the future son-in-law lottery. But that day, all I saw was the perfect picture. My family. Our home. The kind of afternoon that makes you believe everything's right in the world. If only I'd known what was coming. It started small. The kind of changes you almost convince yourself you're imagining. Georgia had always been practical. She wore flats because they were comfortable. She threw her hair up in a ponytail for errands. Makeup was reserved for special occasions, weddings, parties, the kind of events where you wanted to look your best. But then, one Thursday evening, she came down the stairs in heels. I was sitting at the kitchen table, finishing up some work on my laptop, and I glanced up at the sound of her steps. Heels. She wore this deep blue dress I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was done, makeup perfect, lips painted the shade she used on our anniversary dinners. Big meeting? I asked, half joking, half curious. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, late client dinner. Don't wait up, okay? I wanted to say something else, maybe ask why the sudden transformation for a client, but I didn't. I told myself it was none of my business. Georgia was good at her job. If dressing up helped close a deal, who was I to question it? But it didn't stop there. The late nights became more frequent. The heels and lipstick became part of her work uniform. And the phone, God, the phone was always in her hand, screen turned away from me, as if shielding private jokes or secrets I had no right to see. One evening she was rushing out the door, clutching her purse like it held the crown jewels, and she dropped her keys. I bent down to pick them up for her, and she snatched them from my hand so fast it startled me. You okay? I asked. Just late, she snapped, then forced a smile. Sorry, I'm just stressed. I nodded. Of course. Be safe. That night, I sat on the porch long after she left, beer in hand, staring at the stars and trying to quiet the uncomfortable knot forming in my stomach. It wasn't just the late nights. Around that time, Emily started inviting Dan over more often. He became a regular at our house. Dan was everything Emily had described. Tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, athletic build, easy grin that made you want to like him. The kind of guy who seemed older than his years, confident in a way that didn't feel forced. He had this way of making people laugh, of putting them at ease. I liked him. I really did. Our first proper meeting was during a Saturday evening barbecue. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting that golden light that makes even the most ordinary backyard look magical. I was at the grill, flipping burgers, the smell of charcoal and sizzling meat filling the air. Emily and Dan were setting the table on the patio, laughing about something that probably had to do with school or friends I didn't know. Georgia came out with a bowl of salad, wearing a sundress and those same heels that had become her new favorite. She looked beautiful. She always did. But that night, I noticed something else, how tense she seemed when Dan was around. At one point, she reached to hand him a plate, and her fingers fumbled. The plate slipped and clattered to the ground, thankfully unbroken. Whoa, you okay? Dan asked, bending down to grab it. Georgia's laugh was forced, high-pitched. Guess I'm clumsy tonight. Dan grinned, brushing it off like it was nothing. But I saw the way she avoided his gaze after that. How she kept her distance, stayed busy in the kitchen while we ate outside. I chalked it up to stress. The late nights, the demanding clients, the pressure she put on herself to be perfect at everything. Because that's what you do when you don't want to see what's in front of you. You explain it away. You tell yourself stories that make the pieces fit, even when they don't. Later that night, after Dan had gone home and Emily had disappeared upstairs to call a friend or scroll through social media, I found Georgia in the living room, staring out the window. You're quiet tonight, I said, sitting beside her. She shook her head. Just tired. I reached for her hand, and for a second, I thought she'd pull away. But she didn't. She let me hold it, but it felt limp, like I was holding something fragile I wasn't meant to touch. We sat like that for a while, the room heavy with words unspoken. If I could go back to that night, I'd ask her the questions I was too afraid to voice. I'd look a little closer at the cracks starting to form in the perfect picture I thought we had. But I didn't. I stayed silent, and the cracks kept growing. They say hindsight is 20/20. I hate that phrase now, because looking back, all the signs were there, plain as day, and I missed every single one of them. Or maybe I didn't miss them. I just didn't want to see. Dan became a fixture in our home. At first, it felt normal. Emily was always talking about their classes, their projects, their shared jokes. So when he started showing up more often, on weekends, after class, sometimes for dinner, I didn't think much of it. He was polite. He offered to help with chores. He'd bring over coffee from that overpriced place downtown, one for Emily and always one for Georgia. Thought you might need a pick-me-up after your long day, he'd say, handing it to her with that easy grin. And Georgia would laugh. That laugh that used to be just for me, the kind that lit up her face, made her eyes shine. I remember one afternoon, Emily had gone upstairs to grab a book, and I walked into the kitchen to find Dan and Georgia sitting at the bar stool counter by the window. The late afternoon sun streamed in through the big windows, casting this golden light that made everything look softer, warmer. They were leaning toward each other, not in a way that screamed intimacy. No, it was more subtle than that. Just close enough to notice, just close enough to sting. Georgia threw her head back at something Dan said, laughing in a way that felt too free, too real. When they noticed me, they straightened up. Georgia busied herself with wiping the counter, even though it was already spotless. "Hey, Dad," Dan said, as if nothing was out of place. "Hey," I managed, grabbing a glass of water I didn't really want. Moments like that should have set off alarms, but I was too wrapped up in my own head, telling myself there was nothing wrong. After all, what would a young guy like Dan want with a woman twice his age? But the distance between Georgia and me kept growing. Her touches became fleeting, like she was afraid of lingering too long. A kiss on the cheek instead of the lips. A pat on the shoulder instead of holding my hand. Our conversations shrank too. Where we used to talk about everything, the news, Emily's future, plans for vacations, now it was all schedules, errands, what needed to be fixed around the house. One night, I decided to do something about it. I made a reservation at her favorite Italian place, the one where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. I even picked up a bottle of that wine she used to love, the one we could never really afford but splurged on for special occasions. When she came home tired and distracted, I smiled and said, "Let's go out tonight, just the two of us, like old times." Georgia hesitated. That hesitation cut deeper than I expected. "Sam, I'm exhausted," she said, sighing as she kicked off her shoes. "I've had meetings all day. Can we do it another time?" "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. Another time. I watched her as she disappeared upstairs, leaving me standing there with the reservation on my phone and the wine sweating on the counter. That night, I sat alone on the porch, the bottle of wine open beside me, untouched. The sky was clear, the stars out in full force. I remember looking up at them and thinking how small I felt. In my head, I joked to myself because what else could I do? Here I am, the old dog trying to learn new tricks. But maybe it's too late for tricks. I tried to shake it off. Tried to believe that maybe she really was just tired. That maybe we'd find our way back to each other once the busy season at work passed. Once Emily graduated. Once life slowed down. But deep down, I think I knew. The cracks were getting wider. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because Tuesdays had always been uneventful, the kind of day that slides by unnoticed, wedged between the chaos of Monday and the hopeful hum of midweek. Georgia came downstairs, dressed sharper than any client dinner could possibly require. Black dress, heels that clicked across the floor, that shade of lipstick that used to be for me. "I've got that late meeting," she said, grabbing her purse, not quite looking at me. "Don't wait up." I nodded, swallowing words I didn't know how to say. She was out the door before I could change my mind. The house felt too quiet after she left. Even the hum of the fridge sounded louder than usual. I stood there for a while, staring at the spot where she'd just been, like if I waited long enough, she'd walk back in and say she forgot something. But she didn't. And that's when it happened. Her phone. She'd left it charging on the nightstand upstairs. I walked up to the bedroom, slow at first, as if hoping I'd talk myself out of what I was about to do. My mind raced. I told myself this wasn't me. I wasn't the snooping husband. I trusted her. I loved her. But love wasn't enough anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed, the lamp casting a warm, weak glow over the room. The kind of light that made everything look softer, even when it didn't deserve to. Her phone lit up, an incoming message, just a flash of the screen. I picked it up, hands shaking more than I'd like to admit. The lock screen glowed in the dim room. A preview of the message. "Dan, miss you already." My stomach turned. I stared at it, frozen. This had to be a joke. A mistake. Some harmless inside joke between friends. Right? But I knew better. Fingers trembling, I unlocked the phone. She hadn't changed the password. Part of me wished she had. The messages were all there. At first, They were innocent enough. Thanks for the coffee today. You always know what I need. Then they changed. You looked incredible tonight. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I hate when we have to act like nothing's happening. Wish I could fall asleep next to you tonight. There were photos too. A selfie of them at a cafe, heads tilted together, smiles too intimate to belong to just friends. His arm was around her shoulders. Her head leaned in, like it belonged there. Another of them in his car, Georgia looking at him with that light in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. The messages kept going. Late nights, early mornings, stolen moments. I put the phone down, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in the room. My hands covered my face, trying to block out the reality I'd just uncovered. It was like I'd stumbled into some cheap sitcom plot, the kind you watch and think, that would never happen to me. But it was happening. The woman I'd built a life with, the woman I'd shared a home, a child, 2 decades with, was in love, or at least deeply entangled, with my daughter's best friend. I sat there, staring at the floor, the messages replaying in my head like some cruel highlight reel. I tried to feel angry, and I did. Somewhere deep down the fury burned. But mostly, I felt hollow. How long had I been blind? How many times had I smiled at Dan, thanked him for helping Emily, welcomed him into our home, while he was stealing what little remained of my marriage? The absurdity of it all hit me at once, and for a brief, sickening second, I laughed. Just a short, bitter sound in the silent room. Because what else was I supposed to do? I sat like that for what felt like hours. The soft glow of the lamp, the occasional buzz of a new message I didn't bother to read. The house, once filled with warmth and life, now felt like a stranger's place. When Georgia finally came home, I was still sitting there. But that's another part of the story. Morning came, though I barely noticed the hours pass. I'd sat awake most of the night, the house dead silent except for the occasional creak of the old wood floors, the soft tick of the kitchen clock I could hear even from upstairs. Georgia had come home late. I heard her moving around downstairs, trying to be quiet, as if silence could undo what was already done. She didn't come up to check on me. I didn't go down to see her. When the gray light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, I finally stood, legs stiff from sitting so long. My mind felt numb, like I was watching my own life from the outside. I found her in the kitchen. The room was filled with that soft, cold morning light. Georgia was at the counter, her back to me, staring at nothing. A cup of coffee sat untouched beside her, steam long since vanished. I cleared my throat. She jumped slightly, as if she'd forgotten anyone else lived here. "Georgia," I said quietly, "we need to talk." She turned, and for the first time in a long time, she really looked at me. Her eyes were tired, red at the edges. No makeup now, no heels, just her, stripped of the armor she'd been wearing for months. "Okay," she said, her voice small. I sat at the table, the same spot where I'd shared hundreds of breakfasts, late-night snacks, stolen moments of peace. She sat across from me, folding her hands like she was bracing for impact. I didn't shout. I didn't throw things or accuse or demand. Maybe I should have. Maybe that would have made me feel better. But instead, my voice came out low, almost too calm. "I know," I said. Her face froze, like a mask shattering. She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. "I read the messages," I added. Georgia dropped her gaze to the table. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The silence was heavier than any words could have been. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." I let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't mean for what? The texts? The pictures? The part where you fell into the arms of our daughter's best friend?" Her eyes welled up. "Sam, please, I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I echoed, leaning forward. "For what? That you did it? Or that I found out?" Her mouth opened, closed. The tears spilled over now, and she wiped at them angrily, as if furious at herself for breaking down. It just happened," she said, voice cracking. "I was lonely. You were always working, and when you weren't, you were tired, distracted. And Dan, he listened. He saw me." I stared at her, stunned. "And I didn't? What am I, Georgia? Invisible?" She flinched at that. "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant," I said, my voice rising for the first time. I took a deep breath, forcing it down. I didn't want to wake Emily. I didn't want this to be how she found out. I never wanted to hurt you, Georgia said, reaching across the table, as if to take my hand. I pulled mine back. Don't, I said softly. Don't pretend you're the victim here. She let her hands fall to her lap. The room felt cold, despite the morning sun trying to warm it through the windows. Please, Sam, she said after a long moment. Don't tell Emily. She doesn't need to know. It would destroy her. I shook my head, almost in disbelief. You're worried about Emily now? You weren't worried about her when you started this. Her tears flowed freely now, but I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt too much. Anger, grief, disappointment, all mixed together until I couldn't separate them anymore. I love you, Sam, she said. The words sounded hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I stood. No, you don't get to say that, not now. She sat there, broken, while I walked to the window and stared out at the yard, the same yard where I'd grilled burgers for Dan, where I'd watched Emily and him laugh and joke, where I thought we were happy. I thought of all the times I'd missed the signs, all the times I could have asked questions but didn't, and now, here we were. I'll keep quiet for Emily's sake, I said at last. But I can't stay here, not like this. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. I left the room, left her sitting there with her cold coffee and her regrets. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly alone. I packed a bag that same afternoon. It wasn't dramatic. No slamming drawers or throwing things into a suitcase like in the movies. Just quiet, mechanical movements. A few shirts, jeans, toothbrush, phone charger. I stood there staring at the closet for a long time, realizing I didn't know what else to take. I left Georgia in the kitchen. She didn't try to stop me. Maybe she knew she couldn't. I texted my oldest friend, Mike. We'd been buddies since high school, the kind of friend who'd show up with a shovel if you said you had a body to hide. Need a place for a few days, I wrote. His reply came almost instantly. Get over here, man. Bring beer. Mike lived on the other side of town, in a cluttered apartment above his auto shop. The place smelled faintly of motor oil and pizza, but it felt like a refuge. Damn, Sam, he said as he opened the door, pulling me into a bear hug. You look like hell. Feel like it too, I muttered. He clapped me on the back, steering me inside. Well, you're in luck. I'm running a special, first beer's free, and the second one's on the house. He cracked open 2 cold ones, handed me one, and plopped onto the sagging couch. The next few days blurred together. Mike tried to cheer me up the only way he knew how. Bad jokes, takeout, and marathons of cheesy action movies. At night, when the apartment got quiet, I lay awake on his lumpy guest mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, my mind refusing to shut off. The memories came in waves. Georgia, the first night we met, when she laughed at one of my dumb jokes like it was the funniest thing in the world. Our first kiss outside that little coffee shop. The way she looked on our wedding day, nervous and glowing all at once. And Emily, the moment I first held her, tiny and wrinkled and perfect. Her first steps, first words, first scraped knee. What had I done to lose all that? The guilt hit me as hard as the betrayal. I hadn't been the perfect husband. I worked too much. I missed dinners. I forgot anniversaries. But I'd never stopped loving them. I'd never imagined a world without the 3 of us together. On the 3rd night, my phone buzzed in the dark. It was Emily. Dad, where are you? Are you okay? I stared at the screen, heart aching. I'm okay, kiddo. Just needed a little time to think. I'll call you tomorrow. She replied right away. I miss you. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in my eyes. I miss you too. Another buzz, this time, a number I didn't want to see. Dan. Mr. Anderson, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Please believe me. I almost threw the phone across the room. Instead, I set it face down on the nightstand and rolled over, willing sleep to come. But the memories kept playing, a cruel movie on repeat. Georgia's smile when she saw Dan, her laugh at his jokes, the way she'd looked at him, how she used to look at me. Mike found me the next morning nursing cold coffee at his kitchen table. You gotta stop beating yourself up, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. You didn't do this. She did. I shrugged. Doesn't change what's broken. He grinned. Then stopped staring at the pieces. Get a new damn plate. Despite myself, I laughed. A short, rough sound, but it felt good. That afternoon, I stepped outside and let the autumn air fill my lungs. The city noise, the scent of grease from the shop, the sun on my face, it reminded me I was still here. I had lost my wife. I had lost my marriage. But I hadn't lost everything. I was still Emily's dad. And that had to mean something. A few days later, I went home, not for Georgia, not for any hope of fixing what was broken beyond repair. I went back for Emily. Mike helped me load my bag into the car, clapping me on the shoulder before I left. Go be her dad, he said. That's what matters now. I drove in silence, the city giving way to quiet streets lined with trees just starting to shed their leaves. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked the same. The house, the yard, the porch where we'd shared so many evenings. But it felt different, like a stranger lived there now. Emily opened the door before I even knocked. Her face lit up, and for a second, I felt like I could breathe again. Dad, she said, throwing her arms around me. I hugged her tight, holding on a little longer than I should have. I missed you, kiddo, I said, my voice thick. I missed you too. Please don't go away again. I'm here, I promised. I'm not going anywhere. Georgia stood behind her, hands wringing a dish towel, eyes full of things she wanted to say. I nodded to her, but that was all. The next few days were a strange limbo. I slept in the guest room. Emily was so happy to have me home that she didn't question it. At first, Georgia tried to act like things could go back to normal, making breakfast, asking about my day, trying to engage me in small talk. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, all I saw was Dan's face in those photos. All I heard were the words from those messages. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, Georgia cornered me in the kitchen. Sam, she said softly, can we talk? I sighed, leaning against the counter. About what? About us. There is no us anymore, Georgia, I said, not harshly, just tired. She blinked back tears. Please, don't do this. Don't do this? I laughed, bitter. You already did. Her voice rose, desperate. It wasn't just about Dan. It was everything. You were gone all the time. I felt invisible. And sleeping with our daughter's best friend fixed that? Her face crumpled. I'm sorry. You keep saying that, I said. It doesn't change anything. We didn't notice Emily standing in the doorway until she spoke. Mom? Georgia froze. I turned, my heart sinking. Emily stood there, pale, eyes wide with confusion and fear. What's going on? She asked, voice trembling. I opened my mouth, searching for the right words, but Georgia beat me to it. I made a mistake, sweetie, she said, stepping toward her. A terrible mistake. Emily shook her head, backing away. What kind of mistake? The room felt like it was closing in. Emily, I started. With Dan? Emily's voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. You and Dan? Georgia reached for her, but Emily pulled back. Don't touch me. Emily, please, Georgia begged. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But the damage was done. Emily turned to me, eyes pleading. Dad? I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around her as she sobbed against my chest. It's not your fault, I whispered. None of this is your fault. And you're not losing me. I'm right here. We stood like that for a long time. Georgia sank into a chair, weeping silently. But I couldn't focus on her anymore. My world was Emily. That night, after Emily cried herself to sleep, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring out at the yard. The decision came easily, finally. In the morning, I told Georgia, I'm filing for divorce. She didn't argue. Maybe she knew it was the only path left. And as painful as it was, I felt a strange sense of peace. Because no matter what, I still had Emily. And that was enough. It's been a few months now, long enough for the dust to settle, though some days it still feels like I'm brushing it off my clothes. Emily and I moved into a small rental house across town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a creaky porch, and a tiny backyard, but it's ours. And more importantly, it's a place where we can breathe. Georgia reaches out from time to time. Texts, emails, sometimes calls. The messages always start the same: "I'm sorry. I miss you. I miss us." Emily answers, when she answers at all, with short, polite replies. "I'm busy. Hope you're well. Maybe another time." I can see how much it hurts her to write even that much. But she does it because she's kind, because that's who she is. Dan? Dan's gone. Transferred to a different university. I heard it through one of Emily's friends. No goodbye, no explanations, just vanished, like a bad dream we're all trying to forget. And maybe that's for the best. Life is quieter now. Simpler. I work from home most days. Emily focuses on school, determined to graduate on time despite everything that's happened. We talk more. We laugh more. It's not perfect. What is? But we're figuring it out together. Tonight, we're on the porch of our little house, grilling burgers. The sun's setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. The air smells like charcoal and fresh grass. Emily leans against the railing, watching me flip a patty with the concentration of a man trying to solve the world's problems with a spatula. "You're really taking this burger thing seriously, huh?" she teases, a smile tugging at her lips. I grin, feeling lighter than I have in months. Well, someone's got to maintain the family tradition. She laughs, the sound warm and real. What tradition? The tradition of me making the best burgers in town, obviously. She shakes her head, but she's still smiling. "Sure, Dad. Best in town." I plate the burgers, handing one to her. We sit on the steps, eating in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after a storm has passed. And as the stars start to appear, I think about everything we've lost and everything we've found. Because in the end, we're still here, together. And that's enough.